New alarm bells ringing tonight on the coronavirus outbreak in this country.
Doctors say the virus is spread through droplets when someone coughs or sneezes.
And I think the business community, it's in their interest that people actually stay home and stop the spread.
For a business that can allow more employees to telecommute, we want you to do that.
Hi, friends. I'm Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast, and I want to encourage you to listen to my brand new special 6-part podcast miniseries titled Selling with Purpose. The team behind Sales Enablement Podcast and I put together this incredible series of inspiring conversations exploring what it means to sell with a mission greater than just hitting your numbers in this era of COVID-19 and beyond. So tune in to hear from world-class enterprise sales leaders and learn how their 6 companies will close $50 billion selling remotely. See how they've supported essential workers with the products and services they need to stay safe and thrive during this time of crisis. Subscribe to Selling with a Purpose now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Guided selling from RingDNA makes your entire sales team more effective by revealing exactly what reps should do and when to do it. Guided selling works by transforming sales data into a curated list of prioritized sales actions. So when reps start their day, they'll never again wonder which prospects and accounts or hot inbound leads to reach out to next. Guided selling even shifts reps' priority in response to real-time buying signals. Finally, even new reps can sell like seasoned ones. Let RingDNA be your guide to success. Learn more at ringdna.com/guided selling. That's ringdna.com/guided selling.
It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 726 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. I have another excellent episode lined up for you today. Joining me as my guest on this episode of Accelerate is Bill Wilson. And Bill's the co-founder and CEO at SalesRight. And the topic we're going to dig into today is transparency in sales, especially when it comes to pricing. So Bill and I are going to dig into when is the right time to talk about price with your prospects. And how do you keep the buyer engaged as they go through their buying process and perhaps their needs and requirements change? How do you keep them engaged in a really transparent fashion about pricing and what their options are and what it means for them now and what it means in terms of the value they're going to receive, the ROI they're going to receive from investing in your solution? And we're also going to talk about why sellers so often want to defer that price conversation. Yeah, actually, why sales experts will give you that advice. Oh, don't talk about price. Do you get enough information for them to provide some context? Which, oftentimes defers the price discussion way too late into the game, just creating suspicion from the buyer. So Bill and I are going to get into why you don't want to take that course of action. And we'll talk about what's the number one piece of information your buyers want. So before I get to Bill, I want to take a quick second to talk about my Sales Growth Planner. The Sales House Growth Planner is the ultimate planner and tracker for high-performance sellers and sales leaders. The Sales Growth Planner is built to help you identify your big, bold sales goals and give you a step-by-step framework to enable the learning and growing you need to achieve them. It's all based on a planning format that I've successfully used myself for over 4 decades as a top producer and a high-growth sales leader. Because I know the thought and effort you put into creating your plan will be repaid with interest at the end of 12 months. So become the best version of you. Visit thesaleshouse.com/planner to get your sales growth planner today. That is thesaleshouse.com/planner. All right, let's jump into it. Bill, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Well, my pleasure. My pleasure. So you're actually the second entrepreneur we've had join us from Halifax.
Oh, wow.
I shouldn't have said that. Now I forgot it is. Lead Shift, I think.
Oh, yeah, Lead Shift.
Yeah.
Toucan Das.
Yeah, Toucan. Great guy.
Yeah, I love Toucan. He's cool.
So it seems like there's a little tech startup scene going on in the very remote reaches of Canada.
Yeah, no, there's a really good scene. It's been, several years in the making, but over the last, 10 years, I'd say it's really built up. In the last few years, it's been going really strong.
So what's the attraction for? I mean, is there
a university there, a major university that's putting out engineering employees, or what's driving that?
Yeah, there's several universities, big university town. We're the largest center, I think, this side of Montreal, east of Montreal. But I want to say there's 7 universities. There may be less now.
Really?
I think
In Halifax?
Yeah, I think there's been some, amalgamation over time.
Mm-hmm.
But there's several really good tech schools, and there's been a real big focus on tech and entrepreneurship over the last few years. So it's been really great to see it. And there's some really good, community support and governmental support designed to attract talent and retain it. And then, of course, to help build startups. So, for example, our office is in a a startup house called Volta Labs. And they've got 3 floors of an office building downtown and provide all kinds of support and programs and co-working space. It's really great.
And how big of a metropolitan area is Halifax?
I believe it's about it's a little less than 500,000 if you count it. Yeah. So the downtown and there was a series of cities that amalgamated in the 90s. So it's far-reaching, but the core is probably a few 100,000, and then areas make up the rest. Yeah.
Got it. Well, that's the great thing about the whole tech industry is you can do it from anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, tell us a little bit about your company, Sales Right,
Sure.
RIGHT.
Yep.
And I mean, there's a message in there, I presume, in the name.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sales Right is really designed to provide transparent pricing for B2B SaaS. There's an element of, in typical B2B SaaS, you've got your self-serve sign-up pages, where you've got the 2 or 3 tiers. And then you almost always have that right-hand tier that says call us or enterprise.
Right.
So, that's where we sort of focus. So the usual process once you get into that tier is, you talk to a BDR, they qualify you a little bit. They shuttle you off to an account executive. That account executive does their thing, and they dig into your problem and they take you through the software, and they really get to your pain. And then ultimately what you end up with is probably an email with a block of text in it or a PDF and a price. And you're now left with that single option. And I feel like that's where things start to break. Because
people only have one choice.
Yeah. And I think, people like to control their own destiny. We have this day and age, buyers are really smart, and they want to be able to play a bit of what if analysis and, understand what their options are without having to go back and forth with
people like you and me.
Yeah, exactly. Like just constant back and forth. So, in a spirit of trying to shorten that sales cycle, but I think really what it comes down to is trust and transparency. So if we can provide a bit more transparency and allow our prospects to participate in the pricing conversation, I think we'll build a lot more trust with them. And, ultimately, if we can do it right, there's a few psychological buying principles that we can take advantage of that we often take advantage of in our self-serve models, but not very often do we do it inside our custom deals.
Okay. So what your application does, it become part of somebody's sales stack?
Yeah. So it sort of fits in that late stage opportunity to close, where you're doing those custom B2B SaaS sales. Mm-hmm. And we allow people to create, custom pricing guides that allow you to, visualize, several tiers or options.
Which customer accesses through a portal or?
Yeah. So they get sent a link. It's all driven on the web. Mm-hmm. And they get to play around with it. They get to play with some, what if analysis. If the sales rep can get really creative, they can do comparisons against themselves. Maybe they've got their typical package and they're like a package that's built just for them. Maybe it includes customer success management or a few other incentives. And maybe the price is a bit lower in May, so you can even just do comparisons against yourself.
Right. So to create custom bundles.
Yeah, you create custom bundles. And then the beauty of it is that when once you send one of these things out, your prospect is going to start to interact with it. So for us, what we do is then we start surfacing back all the analytics about how they're interacting with it back to the account executive. Because we feel like the follow-ups, we all have to follow up. Like it's just the nature of these, constantly following up. So, but to do that in a way that's much more genuine than just, hey, just trying to get to the back of the top of your inbox. Sure. It's like, hey, I see that you've been focusing a lot on whether to go with the, startup package or the scale package or whatever it happens to be, or, this many documents versus that many documents, or a particular feature they keep looking at over and over again.
So you're doing sort of a little heat map based on where they
Yeah, I mean, we don't have heat maps yet, but we do have analytics about everything they've clicked on and touched.
Okay,
and
so
whenever they choose a different package, we sort of record the change in pricing or the change in value of the contract, things like that. And then, so that allows the account executive at least to have reasonable follow-ups, also timely follow-ups. You can actually reach out to them when they're looking at the pricing,
right,
which is super helpful. But ultimately, we want people to be invested, cognitively in that pricing conversation. There's some real advantages to being able to see where you're going to go. We all know in SaaS,
from the buyer's perspective or the seller's perspective?
Yeah, from the buyer's perspective.
Sure.
And we have, in SaaS, we know that the sale never ends with the sale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they have an option you have to sell them every month on that value. So if they can see how their growth maps into your software, that's amazing, right? So they can see, okay, today I'm at, 50 employees and I want to scale this up to 100. So what might that look like? What would it cost me in the future? Like what's my future state look like with your product? And we think that's really powerful and really empowering for the buyer and super transparent and trust building for the account exec. So, they now have, they're seen as a trusted partner about where they're, how pricing is structured over time. So it's very transparent.
Okay. So just to make clear is because I looked at the site, but I didn't sign up for the demo so you have built-in calculators then? Yeah.
Okay. So, we support things like multi-access pricing where you can, you choose your package, but then you may have a multiplier on top of those packages, which is a really popular sort of expansion mechanism in SaaS. So maybe it's per seat, maybe it's per bundle of contacts or documents or things like this.
Sure.
The other popular ones are things like add-ons. Maybe that there's a really enhanced onboarding you're going to need to do, or multiple training sessions that you want to charge for, or maybe there's a consulting component of what you've got to do. So those can be listed as add-ons, and they may not be necessary, but it's also nice to be able to offer those up as options. So as they select those different things, it sort of builds out their package. They can see a breakdown of what the estimated costs may be, and when they're ready to buy, the account executive has set up the guide in such a way that that call to action that's on there can either be book a meeting with them or fire them off to a commitment link where where they can take payment if they're that's what they do. But more often than not, it's going to send them an email and, let's have that conversation about closing it.
So, all right. So a couple questions then on that. So what led you to sort of identify that this was a problem?
Well, two things. One, I've bought a lot of enterprise SaaS and I've been on the receiving end of these things.
Sure.
And I always have questions. And I'm always left going back and forth with sales reps, and sales reps are busy. So, I may not be the highest on their list that day. So may take me some time to get that information. And maybe sometimes when I got that information, I wasn't necessarily in the headspace to deal with it at that point. So that was a bit frustrating. And then in another business I ran called Mindsea, we sold a lot of productized services, and we realized that packaging them up and comparing them against each other was a really great way, instead of writing a really long proposal that nobody reads.
Was something visually.
Yeah, something visual to actually show people, explicitly what they're getting, what they're not.
Right.
And that also allowed us to take advantage of some anchor pricing and some buying psychology that we had never really considered before, showing the highest priced items to the left and, value going down. All those types of things was really interesting to see play out. So we built a product or a tool inside of Mindsea that basically did this. Pre-tiered via a little web page, and we would send it to our clients. And we didn't have any, we'd send them a link, but more often than not, we would do a screen share, like a Zoom like this. Right. And then we would basically get them to bring up the link on their screen and share their screen. And then we'd watch what they would do. Right. We'd watch how they navigated it. So that was sort of our real-time heat map of how they were navigating pricing. So it really made for a good conversation point. And more often than not, we could close the deal just with one of those guides instead of spending the hours that it's going to take to build out a proposal. So, we found proposals. We would always write proposals. So, we found people would just, look at the very front page, sort of like the overview.
Sure. Yeah, look at the pricing,
right? Pricing really quickly.
Right.
And then if they were really interested, they go look at our terms of service, right? They go look at our contract. So I figured, we can skip a lot of steps here, right? We can start in talking about the value that they're going to receive, and let's lay that out in a way that is also highlights the other big thing that everybody wants to talk about, which is pricing. So that's why we built it that way. And so we built a product inside Mindsea, and every time I showed it to a client, if they were in tech at all, they were like, "Where did you get this tool? This is amazing. Like, I love this." And I said, "Oh, it's a tool we built in-house. No big thing." But I heard it enough that I realized that also, in SaaS, pricing is probably one of the biggest levers people can pull, and it's a really tough problem. Mm-hmm. So those two things combined led me to say, this could really help inside that custom sale, and it can also help in tons of other ways just inside the SaaS business itself.
No matter where your sales team is working from, RingDNA can enable them to be more productive and effective. RingDNA offers a complete platform for remote sales teams that gives reps the tools they need to connect with more prospects and create more opportunities and drive more revenue no matter where they're working from. And managers can get real-time insight they need to coach reps to success. Win more deals from anywhere on the planet with RingDNA. Learn more about how RingDNA helps remote teams at ringdna.com/remote work. That's ringdna.com/remote work.
New alarm bells ringing tonight on the coronavirus outbreak in this country.
Doctors say the virus is spread through droplets when someone coughs or sneezes.
And I think the business community, it's in their interest that people actually stay home and stop the spread.
For a business that can allow more employees to telecommute, we want you to do that.
Hi, friends. I'm Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast. And I want to encourage you to listen to my brand new special 6-part podcast miniseries titled Selling with Purpose. The team behind Sales Enablement Podcast and I put together this incredible series of inspiring conversations exploring what it means to sell with a mission greater than just hitting your numbers in this era of COVID-19 and beyond. So tune in to hear from world-class enterprise sales leaders and learn how their 6 companies will close $50 billion selling remotely. See how they've supported essential workers with the products and services they need to stay safe and thrive during this time of crisis. Subscribe to Selling with a Purpose now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Let's jump into that, because I think that I was just thinking what you're talking about is I'm a huge proponent of selling price early in a deal. And I know that's anathema to many traditional sellers. I worked for a boss whose motto was, early in my career, his motto was, quote early, quote often. Right. And we used quotes to qualify and also do discovery. I mean, it was a great mechanism. We were selling large, complex enterprise deals. And if done appropriately, it's very effective. And for me, what I find interesting about this is that qualifications generally done miserably across the board in sales, SaaS, whatever. But my experience found is you cannot consider a prospect qualified until they've bought into your pricing. Right. Doesn't mean it's the final price, but until they've bought into the idea that the outcomes they want to achieve, they can achieve with a certain amount of investment. And they then use that information to make this internal decision, which is decisions get made in 2 steps. And this is, people have studied this as first step is, hey, are we going to make a change or not? Well, this is the information they need to make that change. The second order decision is who we're going to make the change with. The big decision is, are we going to change?
Right.
And so I find this sort of interesting approach to that is that A, sort of demystify the pricing, and B, if you expose pricing on an interesting and logical and sort of value-based perspective early on, that as you go through the selling process and their needs necessarily evolve because they learn more from you, then that automatically gets updated in the pricing. It seems much more collaborative.
Yeah, it's collaborative, and it gives you something to center the conversation around, right? You can always point back to it, So if they come back to you and they say, I really like this, but we're going to need that customer success manager. Like, we're not sure, it's going to take us a while to get ramped up. I don't want to be, I don't want to be left to support. I really need a dedicated customer success manager, and then, they can update it in real time, almost on the phone. They're like, okay, cool, it's updated. Have a look, circulate that amongst your peers or your team, and let me know what you think. It just gives that real, they feel like it's,
does the seller update it or they update it, the customer?
The seller would update it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, they can pick and choose their own adventure, but if that's not on there, if they needed something in the package in that negotiation, it's really easy to show them that value just instantly. They can just change it while they're on the phone and say, okay, refresh your screen, and then there it is, right? They've got their brand new pricing.
Which again is to me is a really good practice because, I think the last thing salespeople should be doing is negotiating. Because first of all, they're horrible at it, pretty much across the board. And we should have. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, I could get going about why you should have professional contracts people handle contracts, but really the way that salespeople should be quote unquote negotiating is just sort of what you were saying. Is if you could do this in real time, which again is a practice I endorse, is. Yeah, we're going to update this package. They say, well, let's see this option. Great, we'll update it. Oh, that's a little high, but I really need that. Well, then the logical thing for the salesperson to say is, well, then maybe we'll just decrease the scope on this side a little bit, right? We'll change the deliverables here to affect the price, and you get your customer service person. Right.
Yeah, and then you end up with this horse trading mentality as opposed to reducing your pricing.
Right, which is really what you need. That to me, that's not negotiation. That is trade-offs, right? You're making trade-offs. And sellers really need to get good at making trade-offs with the buyer. And during the selling process, because then when you get to the end of the line and they say, the pricing is great, we're right where we want to be, they know they can't ask for anything else because you've just established that if you ask for a discount, we're just going to have to decrease the scope. And they've been playing that game with you for however long.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and then it just sets up so many interesting ways to present pricing either early, like even at the BDR stage. If you wanted to get into qualification early, you could even just present basic packages and see if they.
Not sure I go that far, but
yeah, but I mean, certainly outlining packages, maybe not with the price, but certainly outlining the packages and showing them the different options.
Depending who your BDRs and SDRs were, yeah, very possibly.
Sure. Yeah, and then when you get into the actual. Who's in control of pricing. So you've got, your VPs of sales, or depending on the size of the SaaS company, C-level is always involved in pricing. But pricing and displaying of pricing is at that weird intersection of sort of all parts of the product, right? Like you've got product people, you've got salespeople, and you've got, the executive. They're all there. Mm-hmm. And then of course, to get it published and making sure that you can actually build the packages you need, you've got engineering involved and things like that. So it's a real hot button topic. And being able to communicate that across your team effectively is another reason to start thinking about things this way. Being able to package things and display them even for your own internal team training. Like if you're going to change pricing and how things are structured for that particular month, like, all right, guys, here's the June offer. Like, this is what it looks like. This is what we're going with. All your outreach, this is the thing we're going to sell. So here's your guides. Here's your templates. Go for it. Like, let's get some, let's push something to the door. So it just gives people a bit more of a structure to work in without a ton of extra work. The last thing sales rep want to do is process, right? Like,
no, that's right. They don't. Right.
So if we can make it super easy for them, and, ultimately, having this inside your stack, having a tool like this inside your stack connected on both ends to Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever you happen to be using so that deals are automatically updated is going to be, that's ultimately where we want to go. Configure, price, quote is super complicated for a lot of people,
right?
Especially in the SaaS world, like you don't need all of that. So we're trying to pull that, down a bit and make it a bit more simple and attack it from the way that buyers are used to buying, B2C SaaS, the backbone of B2C SaaS has been built on these sort of packaging, and B2B SaaS has followed suit. So, why are we changing this now once we get inside that, custom sale? Like, let's continue that transparency and empowerment of our prospects, builds trust for us, and there's no surprises, right? That's the other big thing. No surprises in the future.
Yeah. Well, and I think that point you made earlier, one thing that's very interesting about it is the fact that you can sort of set up the custom quotes to reflect the way people are accustomed to seeing standard pricing. So with everybody knows the power of three. Supposedly, you're supposed to optimize, optimal, give people three choices, yada, yada, yada. You said start from left to right, which is the opposite of the way most companies do it. They go most expensive on the right to the left.
Pricing. Always go to the left. That's one tidbit.
Start on the left.
Always start with the Cadillac and work down to the neon,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's true. Well, it's... and why not use little things like that to attract the interest of the buyer? So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So you and I had talked a little bit or exchanged communication before, and so you say that you think SaaS sales are broken. Mm-hmm. Why? I mean, and how does that tie to what you're doing?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it is this idea of, I think, for the large part, self-serve SaaS is fine. Like that whole process works great. It's this single option thing that I have a hard time with, and I think that's where a lot of people can benefit from just switching the conversation to a bit more of a let the customer lead. You as salespeople, our job is to figure out what our prospects need. Like that is our job, and you can't take that from you can't take that from them. We're the ones who are going to figure out if our solution can solve your problems or not. If it doesn't, I shouldn't be selling it to you. But
that seems to be where the problem lies, though. That seems to be where the problem resides right now, though, is that, to your point, we sort of figured out B2C, self-serve, SaaS, but as we go up the complexity scale and we actually have to start selling, then we run into issues.
Right. And I think, people are faced with these, there's been so much research and, done into how to sell.
And not much of it very good either.
This is it. So there's lots of great ideas out there, and I think that. But I guess my biggest problem for me was just not understanding why we have all this great, this built-in psychological selling that we already know works, and then we just completely throw it out the window when we go to do a custom sale.
So, meaning what?
So, why do we not give our prospects options? Why do we revert to these systems where we're just constantly emailing back and forth and having this, painful process every time I even do this with HubSpot, going back and forth with HubSpot on pricing. It's just like,
when you're the customer, you mean?
Yeah, it's mind numbing. So why make it more, why add more friction? Lay your cards on the table, be transparent about where things are, line up what you think is going to work for them, and, pre-configure that and say, here you go. Here's what we think is going to work for you. Have a look at it, play with it, dig into it. Because that's ultimately what people want. Do you think people want to call you to talk about their enterprise pricing?
Well, no. So let's operate on some of the assumption that the reason that people aren't changing that is fear. Right. So what's the fear that's keeping sellers from doing exactly what you're proposing?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I talk to a lot of companies about this, and I hear everything from, we don't want to have our competitors get our pricing.
There I have it.
And this is the thing. So competitors know pricing. We don't want to have our pricing out there because we want to show the value that we bring, and we feel like it's really high and people are going to get sticker shock.
Stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, and this is kind of my point. So I think there's a lot of value, I think, in working with companies that have those that mentality of trying to keep their pricing private, and getting into this packaging and pricing mentality of being able to really sort of just lay things out and getting them used to that. I think will do a lot of them a lot of good. And I know a lot necessarily have complex pricing, and I can see why you wouldn't want to put that on your website necessarily, because maybe there are a lot of moving parts, or maybe there's compliance issues.
Yeah, if it's truly a configure price quote system, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So I can totally see that, and we work with a lot of prospects or a lot of companies like that, and they necessarily have stuff locked down. Because there are 12 moving parts, that they have to configure, which is, a bit of an exaggeration, maybe not 12, but, a handful.
But I would think in those instances, they would still want to use a tool like yours for ballpark pricing, estimated pricing, so on.
Yeah. And we found actually a lot of people that have that, multi-axis pricing, especially where there's a few multipliers on top of whatever package or platform they do. We found that we've really opened the doors for them. Like they haven't been able to communicate it a way that made sense. They had really complicated spreadsheets, and they were trying to present those to their prospects and things like that. And they just didn't have a tool that could do it for them and respond quick enough to change. People can build pricing calculators on their website today, no problem. They can do all that kind of stuff. But being able to respond to change, really quickly and get that up on your website and all that kind of stuff, there's always a bunch of friction there. If we can put that in the power of the bullpen, and the VPs of sales, and, in consultation with product, then, it's a matter of changing a few things and they've got a beautiful looking pricing guide again.
Right.
That matches their new pricing structure, lets them do A/B testing, lets customer success teams upsell. Once you get something that you can point at and look at and everybody can visualize, that power is inside the team is palpable. Like they can really, every time I show it, the lights go on and like you can feel haze get lifted when they see that they can actually start to communicate even internally in a more visual way. So I think it avoids a lot of confusion. It saves a lot of time on the back and forth with prospects. It saves a lot of time building out proposals that no one's going to read and you're not going to close. And it really lets you surface all of that.
But that's to your point right there is they're never going to close, they're never going to read and never going to close. That was preordained before you got to that point, right? So using pricing as a qualification tool is something you should have done in those instances so you weren't wasting your time.
Right. And that's what we found, like in my past company. That's why we started using it. Like we'd spend a lot of time creating proposals, and we would talk about pricing with prospects and stuff. But there's nothing like actually seeing it, and in front of them and seeing how they respond to it and if it's for them or not. And I think, ultimately, you need to, if there are objections still after you present pricing, you need to loop back around and find out what those objections are and just make sure that your solution solves their problem, because I hear a lot like, oh, deals aren't won or lost on pricing. And I beg to differ. I think there's actually quite a bit that goes into pricing and how things are structured. And I think it's a very, very important part of the process. And you're right. People are scared to bring it up.
Well, let's dive into the semantics a little bit. I think maybe we fine tune that first saying, which is price, not pricing. Whereas pricing, which I'll call the presentation of price, can absolutely make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I
also have a firm rule that you can't get a price objection from a qualified prospect.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, if they're qualified and
that's why
pricing, what you have, they're going to find a way to make it work.
Well, and that's why pricing and talking about pricing and the value they're going to receive from your solution, how it ties to the outcomes they're going to achieve, is such an essential part of qualification. And yeah, you're not going to do it on the first step. You have to go through discovery, maybe multiple steps of discovery to help them get to that point where they can make that change, no go change decision. But they're not qualified till they do that. They can't do that without pricing.
Right.
And it's such a critical point in a sales process or in the buying journey. As when the customer says, yeah, based on what we've seen so far, based on the various numbers we've seen from the vendors, yeah, this makes sense for us. And the key is that just to make sure they're primarily interested in making that decision based on your pricing. And if you do a great job of laying it out clearly, then you will be in the pole position.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we find that a lot with our clients is that, the polish that it provides for them and the just the shareability in, like, oftentimes you're selling at a certain level and there's still stakeholders you're not talking to. I mean, ultimately you would want to be able to talk to them, but you're not like this, say you build up your champion, right? And you arm him with this pricing. He now has something he can share inside his team. And they can dig into it together and look at it. And still from the perspective of an account executive, it's gold because you're getting all of that feedback as how they're interacting with it and how they're using it. So, it's win-win, on those things, right? It's nice and transparent for the prospect and gives you all the information you need to know what they really think about your pricing.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think the advantage goes, and part of the reason I'm intrigued about what you're doing is that, shareability has to do with how clear things are, right? So if the message presented isn't clear, then shareability goes down substantially, and that hurts you. Yeah,
and it's interesting. We found a few things just on that note, like where people had add-ons and they were worded in a language that made sense, of course, to the product. but didn't make a lot of sense. So there was something they had just gotten used to over time.
Sure.
It's like, oh, we call it the whiz web or whatever.
Right.
And people just don't. And inside their organization, they refer to it as something completely different. So something as simple as that, and seeing those questions come up over and over and again, quick change in the pricing, clarity, value, and they're off to the races. No, don't have to update the marketing collateral. You don't have to update that dog-eared PDF you've been sending to all your clients, paste your logo on it. You don't have to do any of those things. You can just make the change, test it out, and cycle it through. So I think it just arms people with a bunch more tools that they never had at their disposal before.
Yeah, and I think that part of the reason that I find it very interesting as well is that, as a point I make to sellers all the time, and unfortunately not enough of them are putting this into practice, is the mere act of selling to a prospect, or let's say the buyer's mere act of investigating products and services, necessarily changes them. And so what they think they need at the beginning of the process may not be the same as what it is, a week into it, 2 weeks into it, or whatever scale you're working on. And so to have this ability to be able to reflect that in real time in the offers that you're making becomes pretty valuable, as opposed to saying, yeah, well, great, I'll make a note of that when we present our proposal. At the end of the thing, we'll include that. And well, I'm sure you have clients that use this purely in that way and do this just for more clearly laying out pricing at the end of a deal. To me, the value I see is, as a seller, I'd be like, yeah, I want to use this early on. I want to get the pricing out there in front of them. We'll talk about their outcomes. We'll see what changes. We'll keep updating it. And it's this collaboration piece that we talked about.
Yep, absolutely. Collaborative, transparent, trust.
Transparent. Well, and that's right. Well, that's the nice thing about this too is, and your use of the word transparent. This is the first cornerstone of trust. I have a little acronym about how to build trust. It's MICE, M-I-C-E, and the M stands for, are your motivations transparent?
Right.
The I is, do you have integrity? Well, there's, being able to be very transparent with your pricing plays a big part in that. So,
yeah, agreed. And I think if we can get a lot of companies, a lot of sales reps over that awkwardness of talking about pricing and bringing it up early, I think everybody will be in a better position. I think people hold out hope far too long in deals.
Well, yes, they do. Well, yeah. So we say it's human nature. People don't want to hear no, but salespeople have heard this for decades. In training, is a quick no is better. Unfortunately, part of the training too, though, is that no is not really no. And it's like, actually, sometimes no actually is no, and that's okay.
That's okay, yeah. Sometimes no is okay, cool, no, all right, I'll put you back in my drip.
In my drip, yeah, and it'll be yes later, but...
Yeah, maybe not today, right?
No, yeah, I know, there's sort of this particular sort of macho strain of sales that refuses to acknowledge any sort of objection.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's part of it too. Is like, these conversations, these tools, like being able to present this stuff early can bring up a lot of objections you can address early.
Sure.
Like that whole qualification thing you were talking about. Like, you don't really know what their objections are until you really start, putting pen to paper and getting those things in there, right?
Yeah, objections are just questions waiting to be answered. So,
right. Yeah.
Better to surface the questions early. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Bill, we've run out of time, but really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate you coming on. So tell folks how they can find out more about Sales Right and connect with you.
Sure. So you can find me on Twitter at WDR Wilson. You can find us at salesright.co or at salesrightco on Twitter.
And again, that is SALESRIGHT, in case you're not looking at our show notes page. And we'll make sure we do this again. That was a lot of fun.
Great. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for the week. First of all, as always, I want to thank you for joining me, and I want to thank my guest, Bill Wilson. Join me again next week as my guest will be Sean Finder. Sean is the founder and CEO of AutoClose. And Sean and I are going to be talking about whether we've gone too far in automating sales. So be sure to join us then. Before you go, don't forget to check out The Sales House. It is the sales growth accelerator for B2B sellers just like you. Visit saleshouse.com/accelerate. Thanks again for joining me. Until next week, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.
RingDNA is the leading sales enablement platform that uses AI to help scale business growth. Trusted by the top companies across the globe, RingDNA offers a suite of powerful tools for every sales role. The RingDNA Dialer radically improves sales productivity and call connection rates, while guided selling helps reps know exactly what to do and when to do it. Conversation AI uses artificial intelligence to surface the most impactful coaching opportunities in real time. So, no matter where your team is working from, the RingDNA platform can help them exponentially increase call connections, opportunities, and revenue. Learn more at ringdna.com/platform. That's ringdna.com/platform.